Good morning and welcome everybody to the Incarceration Prevention and Reduction Task Force Legal and Justice Systems Committee. It is the 13th of February at 11:32, and we're going to begin with the land acknowledgement statement. Before we begin, we acknowledge that we are gathered on the traditional and unceded territory of the Lummi, Nooksack, Samish, and Semiahmoo people, who have cared for and tended this land since time immemorial. Truth and acknowledgement are critical to building mutual respect and connection across all barriers of heritage and difference. We begin this effort to acknowledge what has been buried by honoring the truth. We pay respect to the elders, past and present. Please take a moment to consider the many legacies of violence, displacement, migration, and settlement that bring us together here today. And please join us in uncovering such truths at any and all public events. Thank you. Before we get started, I'm going to ask Judge Jennifer Forbes if she needs the capability to share, or if you would just like Jill to share. Excellent. So we have a guest speaker today. I'd like to welcome Judge Jennifer Forbes from Kitsap County. She's a Kitsap County Superior Court judge, and I was recently appointed to the Gender and Justice Commission, where she did a presentation, and I asked her to share with us today. Some of you may wonder why I asked for this presentation specifically, because it does speak about civil litigants that are unrepresented. However, I feel that it's tied in directly with criminal defendants, especially when we're referring to domestic violence. And I just, survivors are typically at their greatest danger when they actually leave an abusive relationship. So there is some concern, but I did reach out to some other people and in reference to domestic violence. So something that came out of my talking to others involved was the importance of legal representation for domestic violence survivors in civil matters. And some of the most common barriers to leaving violent relationships include fear of violence, economic dependence, and fear of losing custody of children, or children being unable to protect children from violence. Perpetrators of domestic violence often make threats related to these fears to coerce survivors into staying. Access to civil legal assistance is constantly listed as one of our top local unmet needs for supporting domestic violence survivors. Civil legal assistance can help survivors obtain protection orders and parenting plans with conditions appropriate to address safety risks for themselves and other children. However, perpetrators of domestic violence typically exert control in a multitude of ways, including family finances. This often results in perpetrators being able to hire counsel while survivors do not have access to funds to do so. Survivors without counsel are at a severe disadvantage in civil cases when the abusive partner is represented. Fear of real risks of attempting to get protection orders or parenting plans without legal assistance can also prevent many from even starting the process. So I'm just going to let you guys think about that. Remember, as we are part of the Incarceration Reduction Prevention Task Force, we want to prevent crimes from happening. And I think Judge Forbes' presentation should help us look at other ways that we can assist individuals that are unrepresented to prevent crimes from happening in the future. Won't prevent everything, but it's a start. So I'm going to let Judge Forbes take this away and give us a presentation, and then she'll be available for questions afterwards.
Thank you. Hopefully everybody can hear me okay. My computer just froze up a second ago, so hopefully everything's working properly and you have the right screen in front of you. That's my PowerPoint. So as mentioned, my name is Judge Jennifer Forbes. I am a judge in Kitsap County. I realize my light's a little intense, so let me move it. I'm actually presiding judge in Kitsap County. I've been on the bench since 2013. I come to the bench as a person who, as a child, survived extreme poverty and homelessness. Not extensive homelessness, but for a period of time, my family did have to live in a campground. My mother struggled financially my entire life. And so I have a lot of personal experience I draw on occasionally when it comes to trying to understand the impacts of poverty on our justice system. That somewhat drove me to this group that was founded by the Superior Court judges, and I'm going to talk about it a little bit more detail, sort of the background of that. But we have created a group that's focused on trying to figure out how to provide enhanced access to justice for unrepresented litigants. And I've been chairing that group for since I think it's 2019, 2020 timeframe. So the first focus here is on how this is a real need in our justice system. At this point in time, the estimate is about 75% of civil cases, which does include district court civil cases, including small claims, infractions, and things like that, have at least one or more person who is unrepresented. In the Superior Court side of things, we see that a lot in our domestic relations calendar. We see folks frequently who are there without the benefit of an attorney. Our system, as probably most everybody here knows, was set up hundreds of years ago by people who were trained in their field. It's set up for lawyers to navigate. A lot of our procedures and process date hundreds of years ago. We use Latin based on certain process and procedures that have been around for years. And so we have a system that wasn't meant for a person who's not a lawyer to navigate and to navigate successfully. And the reality of where we're going in terms of the civil justice gap is that we're going to have to start making accommodations to make our justice system work better for people who don't have the benefit of an attorney. A little bit more statistics that we have here is that we have limited resources in the state of Washington. State of Washington has, I think, only now started to scratch the surface of all the issues and the need within the state for addressing this population. And as a judicial officer and a member of the Superior Court Judges Association, we had a conversation about the frustration we have both as judicial officers trying to manage our cases, but also in trying to ensure access to justice happens when we have a party in front of us who doesn't know how to present their case, doesn't know how to put together what we need to hear for their case to be heard on the merits. That frustration led to a conversation in our 2019 long-range planning meeting, which are typically held in June, where we determined that trying to improve access to justice to unrepresented litigants was a priority of the SCJA. So as a result of that, we put together a work group that is what we refer to as the Unrepresented Litigant Ad Hoc Work Group. We started it just in time for COVID, so started it up in early 2020. We have a huge variety of stakeholders. We're really blessed with a large group of different folks from different areas in this, it's, I guess, sort of umbrella of need that we have that come to this task force. We spent a lot of time talking about what our goals were going to be, what our purpose was going to be. We tinkered with how we would refer to these folks. You hear me refer to them as unrepresented litigants rather than self-represented litigants or pro se's. The reason behind that is that the belief of our stakeholder group and the collective work group was that unrepresented litigants really more accurately reflects really their status. They aren't represented at all. They're unrepresented. There has been some pushback on using the word litigant, and also the URL is confusing when we use it because there's obviously website like digital, references to URLs that may make it a little confusing. But for now, that's the terminology that we use. So we spent a lot of time talking about what our goals were going to be. We formed 3 different work groups. We formed a judicial education work group, which I personally chair. We formed a website technology or portal work group. And then we created a self-help center work group. I'm going to talk about each of these work groups here in a little bit more detail. So first, the judicial education work group. As I said, that's the work group I actually chair. That work group is focused on training judicial officers and staff, including clerks and frontline staff at the Superior Court offices, to try to find a way to provide assistance to unrepresented litigants without crossing the line into giving legal advice. This is a very difficult line for folks to navigate. They don't want to be unhelpful to people who come into their office and ask questions, but they also don't want to violate the ethical rules that limit our ability to, look like we're being not impartial by taking a side and providing legal advice. So one of the things we've done some training, I'll talk about that here in a bit, but one of the things we did was work on developing clarifying languages to the Code of Judicial Conduct, particularly in the comment sections of Rule 2.2 and 2.6. The intention there is to make it clear that when a judicial officer or their staff does provide some reasonable accommodations to unrepresented litigants, that they aren't going to be violating their ethical rules that prohibit them from giving legal advice to an unrepresented litigant. We worked for a while on trying to find the best language. We drew from a model code of judicial conduct, which had an expansive list of things that judges could do to assist unrepresented folks in their courtroom, and things like providing copies of statutes, allowing unrepresented folks to present their case in what's called a narrative format rather than question and answer format, things like that. We adopted that rule and then some. We expanded on it. Washington State, I think, at least the last time I looked, has the most expansive language in the Judicial Code of Ethics on this topic. And I'm pretty proud of that fact that we have, I think, crossed into some new territory and are leading the way on one thing for working with this population. The other issue is training. So we've done a lot of training. We've done presentations in both the Superior Court Judges Association, the District Court Judges. We've trained the administrative law judges. We've trained facilitators. We've done a number of trainings that we've done throughout the state, and we're continuing to do so. I just recently trained at Judicial College some of our new judges that have just been elected in the last year. We've also been doing some surveys to try to craft and tailor training for staff that we're working on still. It's definitely a work in progress, trying to figure out the best way to do that. This is a population that is difficult to bring training to because they work at different times. Some courts only have one staff person. When they're in training, they aren't necessarily able to cover the front desk. So it's not an easy group to always bring training to. So we're working on trying to do that. We've also, as noted in the slideshow here, done a survey to see what things they want to learn about. What are the focal points for them that would help them feel like they are being helpful to people, but not crossing the line into an area that would get them or their judges into trouble. The second group that we created is the portal subgroup. This is a work group that's very much a work in progress. If you would go online and try to find resources for unrepresented folks to try to help them navigate the system, you're going to go to several different websites. It's going to be a little here, a little there, and you're going to have a mixed result in terms of the effectiveness of that. What we're hoping to do is create a one-stop shopping sort of place that every judge, court, or staff person across the state could actually direct a person to that will help them find these different websites, have content on its own. This is a difficult thing for a volunteer work group to put together. And so what we have done is we are working with AOC, or the Administrative Office of the Courts, to try to hand this off to them. They're better situated to actually manage such a program. We were looking at partnering with the State Law Library as well as potentially a partner on this particular project of our work group. So it's definitely a work in progress. We've had some early signs of success that sort of fizzled away. So this is one that we definitely have more work to do on. The third work group that we have, or subgroup that we have, is the Self-Help Center work group. And this is a work group that I'm extremely proud of. They have done a lot of really amazing things to really advance this particular project. So a self-help center, I'm going to talk about in a little bit more detail here on the next slide, but a self-help center is for those of you familiar with court facilitators, it's like a court facilitator program, but I say more on steroids, and I'll talk about kind of what the differences are between court facilitators and a self-help center here in a moment. To do this, so we need money. Money from the legislature, because we can't really anticipate local jurisdictions being able to fund these, at least up front. So we have sought and received funding from the legislature for 2 pilot programs. They directed that we had one on the west side of the mountains and one on the east side of the mountains. So we have one in Grays Harbor County, and I'll talk a little bit more about what they do here in the future slide, and one in Spokane County. They are doing things a little differently, and it's actually good because what we're doing is we're studying the way these programs work in the hopes that they'll be able to be replicated. We'll be able to show through hopefully some of the data that they obtain, the benefits of self-help centers, and the hope of maybe helping local jurisdictions replicate this program locally. We don't anticipate the state's going to fund these as a statewide issue, although I would love that, and I think that would be really helpful, particularly if we had regional self-help centers that we could put across the state to really help direct this population to some assistance. But at least at the local level, we're hoping to make a product that people can see the value of, and for really a very reasonable amount of money. We're currently doing this really truly on a shoestring budget. I think it's $260,000 per year per self-help center is the funding that we have from the state, which is almost nothing, especially when you see the amount of work that they do with it. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to talk about what a self-help center is. So first, there are self-help centers across the country. This is not something that Washington State invented. We are using what we understand other states to be doing and trying to replicate or model that. There are a couple states that are sort of the gold standard on this. California is one of them. Arizona is as well. A self-help center is something where it's not just a facilitator where with a facilitator, a person comes and sees them and the facilitator looks over their paperwork and more or less tells them, you've got what you need, or you don't have what you need, or you need to fill out this section. You need to complete this paperwork more completely to proceed with your matter. They're not really supposed to give legal advice. They're not really supposed to help a person figure out what law applies or how to navigate certain procedural issues. They're very much focused on sort of a very narrow lane. Facilitators are also limited by court rules to what they can do. They can't discuss cases that are outside of what they're approved to review under the court rules. So a self-help center goes beyond that. It allows folks to meet oftentimes with lawyers to actually get actual legal advice, not just guidance on procedure and process, but actually legal advice from lawyers. And what we've learned is that the more direct contact an unrepresented person can have with a legal professional, the better they're able to present their case on the merits rather than getting bogged down in the procedural issues that sometimes prevent them from bringing their case to the court on its merits. So as I said, we have 2 programs. The first one is the Grays Harbor Superior Court Program. They are running out of a little storefront in downtown Aberdeen. Like full-time. It's open basically business hours. They have they stole their court facilitator from their clerk's office and have placed their facilitator in this office space. The facilitator does the usual facilitator work, but also helps connect. Sorry, I'm getting a phone call. Also helps connect them with a lawyer. And then they have a lawyer who comes in at scheduled times and meets with individuals on different cases and actually gives legal advice to the litigants. It's been very successful. It serves multiple counties. It's actually served, I think, as I understand it, Pacific County, Mason County, and I'm probably missing another county, who have actually made use of the Self-Help Center in Grays Harbor. The Grays Harbor judicial officers are really thrilled with how well this is working, and they feel like it's a true benefit to their community. The second self-help center is in Spokane. It's done a little differently. Spokane didn't have the office space or workspace to really do a kind of a regular office hour kind of court self-help center. So what they're doing is, as I understand it, is they're running sort of clinics, if you will, very clearly specified times and dates for clinics. They're advertising those clinics so folks know that they can come on those clinic days and meet with lawyers and others to try to navigate their legal issues. They have, here's an example of a flyer that they have used to inform or educate folks of their existence and what they're able to do. And the as I understand it, the photo there is actually a photo from somebody actually doing help in one of their self-help centers. It might have been staged, but that's what I understand is the intention there, is that's actually what they do. They sit down and talk over process and procedures with the person who's seeking assistance. Self-help centers are I think something that can be tailored and different from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. Our hope is that they continue and that we continue to see them throughout the state and hopefully in Whatcom County or other counties. It'd be really an advantage to your population who doesn't usually have the ability to access justice in a meaningful way. They're really helpful. Our long-term goals is that this work group can't really do this work forever. It's truly volunteer work, and people who do a lot of volunteer work can say that, you know, trying to carry the load in perpetuity like this is pretty difficult. So our hope is to really start to hand this over to the AOC's Equity and Access team. This is really what they're built for. They came along, I think, a little after we got started, and so we're now starting to really transition a lot of this over to them. The SCJ, the DMCJ are still going to maintain their connection and action, you know, and activity when it comes to doing judicial training. And I am scheduled to do judicial college training on this topic for a couple of years more to go. We are also doing training as usual on our regular conferences, and we'll continue to do that. But the idea is that we'll be partnering in the future with the AOC to continue this and make sure that it's actually being managed by staff who can keep it up to date and make sure, for example, our portal has good information on it. So that's pretty much my presentation on this work group. I have a lot of presentations that I can do on training and other things like that, because that's something I do quite a bit of. But I am happy to answer any questions. You can also send me an email if you have any questions. So that's all I have for now. You should have also received, I think, in your packet, I saw a judicial bench card that you can make sure your judicial officers have access to. That bench card has a lot of the examples for how you can help an unrepresented litigant in court. It is pulled in part from the judicial ethics rule that I referred to. Also has some resources for folks in that bench card as well.
Thank you so much, Judge Forbes. I really appreciate the presentation. It was beneficial, I think. Does anybody have any questions for Judge Forbes in reference to this topic? Stephen.
Judge Forbes, thank you for the presentation. I'm a retired legal aid lawyer with the Northwest Justice Project Bellingham office, and this is a great step, much needed. It looks a lot like what in my day was the function of the clear line, and so which had even a broader scope than this in terms of subject matter coverage. So I'm wondering how you see the differentiation between these local volunteer efforts and some of the pro bono clinics many jurisdictions set up, or the clear line itself with Northwest Justice Project. What is this adding, or what weren't those doing that this is doing?
Well, I guess what I would say is that our scope is, I think, broader, is as broad as it needs to be. There's no limitations. The court facilitators definitely have limitations on the topics that they can address. The intention here is to make a program like this available on court hours, court time across the state. Right now, at least my understanding is that getting pro bono services is somewhat hit and miss, and we want to make this more of a routine practice closer to the courts. The true gold standard is actually have it in your courthouse. Person comes out of court, I don't know what just happened. They go down to the self-help center, they explain what the judge said, and hopefully somebody there can actually give them some direction and guidance and help them get their case back on track. Or even beforehand, when they're going to file it, they can go there. So a lot of courts have programs that are, close or adjacent to a self-help center, but none of them really focus on everything. A lot of our clear attorneys, for example, have been mostly focused on landlord-tenant cases and issues like that, aren't necessarily focused on helping somebody navigate their divorce case or trying to figure out how they're going to manage that. One person could do all of those things from this center instead of it just being focused on a particular topic. So it's a little broader than that. And, we don't have a clear attorney that sits here anymore like they used to every Friday. Sit down the hall, and then an office that we had, we'd send people down to talk to the lawyer. Now we happen to have tenants lawyers now, so it's a little different situation, but we just don't have a reliable program. What we want is something that's like government funded and more reliable in terms of its office hours and times that it'll be available to people.
Thank you.
Very good question, because I've actually had that question before.
Thank you. Other questions? So just to give you a little bit of food for thought, so Whatcom County Superior Court has one court facilitator for family law, and she just said that she gets usually 20 to 40 calls per week, and then she meets with 20 to 25 per week currently. I am working on getting somebody cross-trained with her because she doesn't have any backup. So if she's out of the office, vacation, sick, training, I don't really have anybody to take that place. And these things don't stop when she leaves. People still need help. So there's that. I have when we divided from the clerk's office and the admin this year, the minor guardianship kind of got lost in that. And currently we're only able to meet with 4 people for minor guardianship a week, which is not enough. There's more needs for that, especially with changes with the drugs and the laws that are changing with fentanyl and dependency. And so those things are going to have a direct effect on the criminal cases that we see, at least from my perspective. And so even though this is helping for civil litigation, I do think it really crosses into criminal litigation. And so it's something that we need to think about. I'd love to see Whatcom County joining in as a pilot project, like what Grace Harbor at Spokane is. So it's just something that I think might be beneficial to our county. If anybody has any other thoughts or questions, please let me know. And I'm sure that I can reach out to Judge Forbes in the future.
Absolutely. And feel free to share my email address. It's in your materials in the PowerPoint at the very end. My email is there. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me.
Okay. Thank you so much. I appreciate the time.
Yep. Thank you so much for having me, and have a good rest of your meeting. I'm going to head off to lunch.
Excellent. So the next item on the agenda is the March joint meeting for Behavioral Health Advisory Committee. And I wanted to see if anybody here had any topics, any suggestions, food for thought on what we need to discuss at that next meeting. Sheriff Tanksley.
Sure. One of the things that I'm thinking about is when you just spoke about the separation with with the clerk and superior court, what the implications of that is and how that looks. So I think perhaps maybe at that next meeting, could you briefly just tell us about that?
I'd be happy to. In fact, I would love to have Jill, if you can invite Stephanie Kraft to that next meeting, as she's part of this division and the legal separation that's ongoing with Superior Court. And I don't expect that to be completed until the end of this year, as we're still currently trying to figure out the division of our budget. So it's working.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Raylene, might it be appropriate for a summary from the competency work group, just sort of update on True Blood funding, prosecutorial diversion project, that kind of thing?
I think we can arrange that. Perry, can you help us with that?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I'll collect some information. When is the combined meeting, ready?
It's I believe March 13th, but Jill, can you correct me on that if I'm wrong?
March 12th.
Oh, okay, March 12th. I forgot there's a leap year in there. It's not the same. And time flies when you're having fun. I didn't know how fast it was, and I looked up and I'm like, oh, this meeting is today. So I'm glad that happened. Does there anybody else have anything that they would like to see added to that agenda? I know that behavioral health might have other topics that they want to discuss. All is quiet. Well, if there's other items that you guys think of going forward, please email myself and Jill, and we'll try to get that.
I guess I have a question.
Yeah.
In regard to I know that the new jail complex is in early days, and that there's still a lot of thought going into like even who's going to do the design and that kind of thing. But do we want to schedule like regular updates from that body with this group, or do we have that? Like, do we want to do quarterly updates from them or something so that we know what they're doing and so that we can hear about how they're going to integrate the behavioral health aspects into their design and development. I just don't know if there's a reporting schedule, or I don't know.
I think that's a great idea, Eric.
Yeah, I just want to second what Maya asked about, and I think that makes sense that we ask the administration to provide that information to us at our meetings. I don't know if it should be at this meeting or at our main meeting, but we should definitely have the administration reporting to us.
Okay, I will get on that and make sure that happens.
And certainly, I think that's a good idea. I think timing is everything, and so in fact, today I meet with an executive in a few hours, and to figure out just holistically how that information should be and will be sent out. And I know the greater task force has some thoughts on that too. So I do think that's appropriate. But I will say that it is still very, very early in the process. But Maya, I know exactly what you mean.
Thanks, Tank. Stephen?
Yeah, I'd like to support that idea as well. And as to Eric's question, I think having those reports to this committee and separately to the Behavioral Health Committee as well would be valuable, because I think there's some thought now to having a lot of the creative work as well as some of the oversight as things go forward take place in these committees rather than the JPOP, and certainly rather than the task force as a whole. So I think at some point there's a bigger report to come to the task force, but I think there might be tailored reports appropriate to this committee so that we can monitor the legal and justice systems part of things in particular. And it might be different people. It might be Tyler with this system. There might be Kayla with behavioral health stuff to that committee. So another reason to focus it on the committees.
Thank you, Stephen. And just in case you weren't aware, Stephen, Tyler has decided to leave us. We're really, really sad about it.
I am aware of that, and I'm very sad as well.
I don't know that we're going to twist his arm and change his mind, but at least we have him until May, so they'll keep us informed of the changes moving forward.
Yeah.
Any other suggestions or thoughts? Any other business? I'm just gonna pop on and just keep you guys informed. We're still struggling with finding attorneys for conflict cases. I have a fairly large case that I think is coming, or that part of it has already came my way. There's a lot of victims, which means, and some of these victims are defendants. And so trying to find attorneys that aren't already conflicted is a struggle. And we thought we were making ground, and we did get a lot of coverage, and we do have a new attorney that starts on the 20th with a conflict assigned counsel, which I think will take some of the load off. And we are working on getting a legal assistant for those attorneys that are brought on. I am hoping that that will go through council and that we would be able to post that position by the end of February, anticipating we would have somebody brought in by March to assist them. So that's where we're at in that area. So just keeping you informed. I know the Public Defense Office has some changes and people coming on, as well as Eric has new people that just came on. So hopefully we can get that process working. There are talks about moving some of the criminal hearings back to the jail for first appearances, instead of having some people remote and some of them in the jail. We're hoping that process goes a little bit smoother, and we're working really hard to make sure that we have interpreters as well, because that also seems to be a little bit of a challenge. There is a lack of certified and registered interpreters that are available right now. But I have got somebody else on my team with the clerk's office that is taking the bull by the horns, and hopefully we can expedite that. So that's
Hey, Raylene?
Yeah.
As to interpreters, like, is there a local program that certifies? How do folks get certified as interpreters?
So the administration office of the courts has a list for us that we can use that are registered and certified interpreters. Superior Court did not have a language assistance plan in place and didn't jump on the reimbursement plan in the past, which is a goal of mine to make sure that we can get some reimbursement for that. But in order to do that, we have to exhaust the list that's provided by the state. If people are interested on that, they can go to Washington Courts Interpreters. I'm also happy to get individuals the link. I can share that information with you, Maya, if you'd like that.
No, I mean, I think I know what you're saying, but what I'm asking is, like, do you know what body certifies the interpreters, and like where are the interpreters coming from? Like, where do they get their training? Where are they?
Through AOC. So you can have somebody that's trained to speak another language, but they have an ethics class that they have to do, and then they have to pass the tests that either qualifies them as certified or registered.
What's the pipeline to AOC?
I've got the information on where they go. I spoke with one of our Spanish interpreters, and Greta Bauma, and she said it's not as easy as it seems. She said if you know legal terminology before you go into trying to be an interpreter, that's going to be beneficial for you. And she said being able to speak simultaneously is it's a challenge, but she said it is doable, and she was willing to help anybody that was interested in becoming an interpreter and and helping those that wanted to do it. So
Greta is really extraordinary because she has her legal degree from her country of origin, I think. So she's exceptionally qualified for sure. But yeah, I just wondered if there was like a community college program that helped people, or like anything local that kind of would feed that pipeline to get them to AOC, to get them certified. Just curious. It's not, I suppose,
it might be
exactly our mission, but it seems important.
It might be helpful to ask the community college to tie in the criminal justice and foreign language programs as an option to try to get more people certified and registered here. I see Bruce has his hand up, so maybe he has some more input on this.
Maya, I was just going to address the pipeline. Where does the pipeline start question? And it starts with AOC and their website. And there's a lot of information on that website, and that would lead them to the AOC staff that works directly with this interpreter program. And I think, Raylene, you'd mentioned this, but I've heard from a number of interpreters that becoming certified for the courts is not an easy process, and the testing is difficult. But I think it all starts with someone going to the AOC website and just probably in the search line, just typing in interpreter, and it'll take you to the web page. And that would be the best place to get started.
I think it really starts with the language programs at the colleges, universities, or community colleges that would go to AOC, and giving some maybe giving presentations there to inspire people to try to go to AOC, because why they don't know to go, maybe they're not interested in going or they're intimidated by it. And I don't know what we're paying those interpreters, but maybe there could be some recruiting done at that level, because I think if you don't, I get it, you can go to AOC and learn about it and try to become certified, but I don't know I think we got to go to the body of people who are going out to be interpreters in the world and say, hey, come into the court system.
Yeah, I think
but I don't know whose job that is. So I don't know. Anyway, that's just ideas. And maybe there's maybe we need a subcommittee that includes some of our interpreters to do some outreach or something, because I think that's a resource that is only going to be more needed, and we have less and less of it.
I appreciate that, Maya. Thinking outside of the box is beneficial to all of us. Any other comments or questions on other business? I think we're doing well on time. Jill, I'm going to turn it over to you for public comment.
Thank you. We have a couple of attendees today. If you would like to speak to the committee, please virtually raise your hand by selecting the raise hand icon. And no hands are raised, and I don't see any attendees in our conference room. Thank you.
All right, unless there's any objections, I believe this meeting is adjourned. Thank you and have a great afternoon.